To bring in former House Majority Leader and former Virginia Congressman Eric Cantor is with us. Congressman, it's great to see you.
Nice to be here.
Thank you so much. Now you're in the private sector, so you don't have to deal with all of this back and forth anymore.
You know, it's an amazing thing, the private sector in our country. As I said before, it's a very optimistic time for a lot of people, but still there are a lot of people who are hurting. But right now, some optimism in the terms of corporate investors, and as we can see on the earnings seasons, pretty impressive top line and bottom line performance.
Yeah, so have you learned anything different in terms of being at Moelis & Company from being a lawmaker? I mean, has your opinions changed now actually being right there?
Well, I could just say just demonstrably results matter, and actions have consequences. And so something that, frankly, has a hard time setting in Washington.
You don't miss it.
Listen, we all care about our country, and obviously, you know, this show, which is at the intersection of business and policy and politics, I think, you know, we're seeing increasingly, you know, this town, and if not the world of business, period, is watching what happens in Washington to see if it can unleash more of the kind of innovation and growth potential we've got.
Can this optimism, though, Congressman, hold up in terms of what we see in hiring, in growth, earnings growth? Can it hold up if you get nothing out of Washington from the Republicans and their promised agenda?
I think the environment that we've got now with President Trump's administration in office versus what we were suffering under before for the last 8 years under the Obama administration, it's simply the difference of having a federal government in Washington who is not an adversary. It is trying to be a partner to enable people to take risks, to boost investment, create jobs and growth. That in and of itself, I think, is baked into the market. If we can get some of these policy wins, tax reform, get this health care thing done, I think you're going to see a tremendous surge in optimism.
That was the point I was clumsily making, is that the worst case scenario is that you know that this administration and this Congress isn't going to raise your taxes, isn't going to add on more regulations, and that's your worst
Look
case.
at what the Democrats, you know, rolled out yesterday. I mean,
better plan?
Their better deal. I mean,
yeah,
you know, I think the people just sort of shrug that off because they know there's no likelihood of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren getting their outrageously crazy agenda through because the Republicans are in charge.
You mentioned taxes. Let's look beyond health care for a second. How do you see this tax debate playing out over the final months of the year, and what do you think the Republican Party is actually going to get done on taxes?
Look, the Republican Party at its core is about giving people back more of their hard-earned money. At its core, it's about starving the government so that we can see the private sector thrive. So I think we're going to see them get some tax reform done.
But what? What's going to be?
Is it going to be just tax cuts? I mean, we're running out of time, right?
Well, I think in order to get real growth in our economy, we need to see some reform. And that's why, you're right, Maria, it is the clock is ticking. That's why they've got to get this health care thing done so we can get on to what will really help grow our economy.
What are they going to actually get done on
I do think that they'll bring down the corporate rate. I think it's not going to probably be as low as what it was originally stated by the president. I think you're probably going to be somewhere in the mid-20s. I think the international piece of getting straight the competitive position of our multinationals through territorial tax reform, I think we're going to need to see that. People in Washington understand it.
That's supposed to come all the way down to 10%.
Well, listen, you know, I'm not so sure they get there, but at the end of the day, we've heard Secretary Mnuchin, we've heard President Trump and others say it's about middle-class tax reform. So you're going to have to see all that in the mix, which means there's going to be some tough decisions to be made on how you come up with the revenues to pay for, if you will, the rate reductions.
Individual rates will go down, too.
So I absolutely.
But what do you think's going on?
Do that.
Well, what's going on behind closed doors here? I mean, why can't they come to an agreement? You've got all these senators saying, no, I'm not going to vote yes to a bill out of the Senate. I mean,
on the health care thing,
on health care.
You know, it's an interesting sort of element that sort of comes into play when you bring a bill to the floor. You know, and so there's a lot of posturing. It's all theoretical right now, and this is why Mitch McConnell is so intent on saying we need to finally stop talking and act. And the act of bringing this bill up will put those members of the Senate on the spot to say it's real now, not just theory, real. And that's what I think Leader McConnell's counting on. I know when we in the House, when I was there for all those years, it made a big difference when you're there with that voting card ready when the bill comes up.
Right.
If I was a Republican in the House, I would be right out hot angry over the fact that these senators, many of them, just want more and more slop in the trough for them to eat.
And they didn't even vote on the House bill. The House goes back twice, gets a bill out, and they just say, oh, well, we're going to start from scratch. We're going to rip it up and start from scratch. Well, I mean, what was that all about? Why not just vote on the House bill that you were just handed to?
Well, in a way, when you look at it, the real components of the House bill are still in the base of the Senate bill.
Right.
And I think there has been sort of all this addition, but the structure's the same. It's give control back to the states, allow them to design their health care for the indigent, the Medicaid program, make sure you're lifting those mandates that Obamacare had in the taxes. I mean, structurally, there's a lot of similarity between what the Senate will bring up in the House.
What does this say about the party, though, if they can't get this done? And also, does the president have any leverage here? I mean, he's sitting at a 34% approval rating in some polls. You've seen Republican senators saying they're not necessarily going to vote for it just because he wants them to.
Well, there's plenty of leverage that comes from the White House, and especially when you've got united government. That's when big things have happened. You saw it under Obama. We saw it when President Bush was there. Big things can happen. Medicare Part D, for instance, under Bush. That was because we had Republicans working with Republicans. So I think, you know, today's game day. You're going to see, I think, a majority of members of the Senate say, you know what, we don't want to fail. So we've got to get on to at least discussing this bill.
Thoughts on the shakeup at the White House? You've got Anthony Scaramucci in there, new communications director. Now a lot of people saying Reince Priebus is out. Actually, two separate sources told me that Reince Priebus is leaving, but they haven't come up with the date yet.
Listen, you know, Donald Trump was elected by the American people to shake things up. He was an outsider that said, I'm going to disrupt the status quo in that town, and he's doing it. He's got the right to do it, and I think we're going to see that. And the American people want to get rid of, you know, what they perceive as this dysfunctional city, and Donald Trump's in there trying to do it.
And disrupt he has. Eric, great to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you so much. Eric Cantor joining us there. We'll be